Presentation of Losing Ground, The Cliff Effect, is made possible by a grant from the Women's Foundation of Colorado, building resources and leading change so that every woman and girl in Colorado achieves her full potential, and by Janet Mordecai.
No sooner than I have some ground under me, then there's other things that will trigger in, and it's just one more hurdle. And I feel like that mound of that hurdle just gets higher and higher and higher. And sometimes I get over it, and as soon as I coast down one side, I'm like, oh, I'm good. Here comes another one.
I cry on my way to work. I cry on the way back home. Instead of them seeing what mommy is going through or why mom is in pain, I don't show it to them. I don't show it to nobody. It's all behind closed doors.
I only have 30 days to find a job if I want to keep child care assistance. It's very hard to find a job in 30 days, especially something that's going to keep my head above water and also keep me self-sufficient. So that's something I'm really struggling with right now and that I'm looking into that's really scary.
3 single mothers in Colorado, supporting their children, working, furthering their education, all dependent on some form of government work supports to help boost themselves to self-sufficiency. But what if benefits like subsidized childcare, food stamps, or other help will be cut off abruptly just as they start to get a foothold on the edge of making it on their own? Getting a raise at work, cause for celebration in most people's progress, can actually send these women backwards, further into poverty, when they encounter what's known as the cliff effect. This is the story of how reaching self-sufficiency can actually be thwarted by the programs intended to help achieve it. From iNews at Rocky Mountain PBS, this is Losing Ground, The Cliff Effect.
My name is Rachel Contesano, and I am a single mom to a little 4-year-old boy named Kingston, and I live in Denver, Colorado, actually born and raised here.
As she attended her last classes at the Women's College at DU, Rachel Contesano was on the verge of graduation and finishing a degree in business administration. She did, and she's now looking for a job. Her combative experience with work supports and other benefits has also led Rachel to a new appointment on the Denver Welfare Reform Board, representing the voice of those who are trying to meet all the requirements, stay afloat, and get ahead.
It was really kind of scary and nerve-wracking in the beginning, but after I started realizing that I think a lot of people have a lot of assumptions of what they think is happening. They see what's on paper, but they assume that whatever's on paper is what they're giving to the recipients and what's happening for the recipients. But I would have to say 80% of the time that's not true.
Rachel, like many others since the economic downturn of recent years, started out on unemployment benefits after being terminated from a job in New York while she was on maternity leave. She was then forced to apply for additional help when she couldn't find a new job that would pay enough to support herself and her son. Moving back with her parents in Denver and being drawn into the system came with many problems and a sense of moving backwards while trying to get back to self-sufficiency.
It was just getting too difficult to survive. I didn't qualify for food stamps. I was $22 over, so I could not get that as any assistance. We were on a waiting list for childcare for 19 months, and so I needed something quickly, and the only way to get childcare fast enough in the state of Colorado was to be on TANF. And so that's what I did. I was in school full-time, and they only gave me 3 days of childcare. So I did not have full-time care, even though I was going to school full-time. And so I actually paid out of pocket majority of my TANF money to pay for my son to go to school. And that was really, really difficult because, first of all, I didn't have the money to do it. And second of all, if I did what I was responsible for, then they were responsible to help me as well. And that wasn't the case. I did everything I was supposed to do. I followed all the rules. I followed my contract, everything to a T, because I felt, the more honest I am, the better off I will be, and I won't lose the things I really need at that time.
It's these frustrations Rachel will share with the Welfare Reform Board, giving them an inside view of what it's like to navigate the system. At the state capitol in Denver, there is awareness of the plight of Rachel and other low-income parents, but the state does not set the rules of eligibility for child care assistance. That is done by each of the 64 counties acting locally. This situation makes Colorado unique among the 50 states. 6 Colorado counties set the income limit at 130% of federal poverty level, the minimum level. That's $25,000 for a family of 3. Others decide on 140%, 150, 185, as high as 225% of what the federal government says is a poverty income. So depending on where she lives, the local cost of things like childcare, and the county eligibility limits, a woman or family could be closer or farther from the edge of the cliff effect as they move up in a job. John Cathalis is a Democrat state senator from Fort Collins.
A lot of it depends on the county, a lot of it depends on the dollars. And I think fundamental to this is we need to appropriate more dollars into the system. We just lack the funds, and we need to use those dollars wisely. But whether it's at the federal level, which because of sequestration and things like that, there have been reductions in the money we get from the feds, and at the state level, to the credit of the governor, we have appropriated more dollars into CCAP, but it's still a pittance, frankly, in terms of what, regarding what is needed to fill the gaps.
Eligibility limits are one thing. The other major factor creating the cliff effect is how the benefits are withdrawn once the recipient's income has gone over the eligibility line. Usually all at once, a loss of thousands of dollars in support, no matter if the added income is only a fraction of that.
There's been some research done in Colorado, particularly around the Child Care Assistance Program. About a third of the people that the researchers interviewed and studied had said they had strategized to stay on the child care assistance, to getting the subsidized child care, rather than earn a bit more money and to go off.
Rich Jones, research director at the Bell Policy Center, has studied the impact of the cliff effect in Colorado. Bell is among those who favor a pilot project passed by the state legislature in 2012, urging that 10 counties try phasing out the benefits as incomes rise over a 2-year period rather than all at once. Participation is voluntary. To date, no Colorado county has volunteered to try it. Jones says that's because Coloradans and their elected officials value local control.
We see it in K-12 education, we see it in a lot of other issues. And around human services, the delivery of these services, very much a county-based system and a local control system. So it'll vary around the state in terms of what the maximum amount is that you can earn before you would lose benefits. So for a family of 3, which is the average family that is receiving child care assistance, it's generally the mother and 2 children. If you're at, say, $30,000 or so in some of the counties, in some other counties you may only be able to earn up to $20,000 or $25,000. It depends on what county you live in whether you in fact be eligible.
Federal poverty level does not vary. For a family of 3, the government says if you earn less than $19,530 a year, you live in poverty wherever you are. And in Colorado, depending on the percentage of FPL each county sets, a woman with 2 children could well be reluctant to take a raise that would put her slightly ahead of the income limit for child care assistance.
What we would like to see is have a woman take that raise, take that promotion, build those relationships, get educated, and at the same time take a gradual decrease in work supports. That would be much better than the situation as it is today, because really today families take 1 step forward when they increase their wages and get a promotion, but then they take 2 steps back, and they really never get to be economically secure.
Louise Atkinson heads the Women's Foundation of Colorado, the group which commissioned the early research on the cliff effect in Colorado and which continues to work to inform policymakers of what they've learned, what might be improved.
More than 500,000 women in Colorado are poor or nearly poor. In 2000, the number of women in poverty was just under 10%, and now it's 13%. It's getting worse.
In El Paso County, Republican Commissioner Sally Clark is firm in her view about flexibility to set their own county rules within the state framework. Clark says continuous auditing keeps El Paso aware of how it is distributing its allocation, and in a year when they have more money, reevaluate eligibility limits. Clark has been an official of Colorado Counties Incorporated, the lobbying organization for the 64 entities. The organization has twice lobbied against legislation requiring that counties gradually phase out child care benefits, which would have countered the cliff effect.
Local control is always best when you're looking at what the needs of your community is, and from a local perspective, it gave us the flexibility to be able to manage our own dollars appropriately, to see what worked best for our community. We work in partnership in El Paso County with many agencies. Pikes Peak Community Action Agency, Goodwill Industries provides a lot of assistance for our job search and employment training. Counties manage their workforce centers. Those are all places where we can integrate our services, and we know our communities best. I think that local flexibility, having a state supervised system but run by counties, gives you the local determination as to what's right specifically for your community.
Going to school to gain the skills that will allow a living wage is seen by some counties as essential. But this is another rule that varies by county. As a college student, you may be eligible for child care for 2 years in one county like Boulder, but move across the line into Larimer and find that full-time college students are not eligible.
We had to make the choice to serve the poorest of the poor. It was very difficult. It was a very hard choice to make. We did a lot of research and a lot of statistics in determining who we could and couldn't serve. And unfortunately, the student population was one of the populations that was an option, so we had to eliminate them and not be able to cover child care anymore.
Determining just how many families have fallen off the cliff is nearly impossible.
It's extremely hard to know how many families are out there that we can't serve. It's very frustrating to hear their stories, or as a technician or even a supervisor of the program, to have them calling in tears because they're over income by 10 cents. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of wiggle room. It is what it is. I mean, you have guidelines you have to follow, and there's no wiggle room for us.
My name is Janetta Scarsiga, and I'm a mother of 2 boys. I have a 9-year-old son, Antonio, and then a 4-year-old named John. I decided to apply for TANF at the time when I was living with my brother, and I was pretty much homeless. I didn't have nowhere to live. I eventually got 2 part-time jobs. One of my jobs was a nighttime job. I was advertising for a tobacco company, and then my other job was in the mornings. I worked as a legal assistant for a personal injury law firm.
Then Jeanette got a better job working as a customer service rep at Waste Management, making more income, but as a result, losing benefits like subsidized child care or CCAP. Jeanette and her family went over the cliff. Adding so many expenses at once has led her to take on credit card debt and to wonder if it's all worth it.
There was a big impact in my life. For example, just with the CCAP, not having CCAP, it was a struggle every day to find someone who can watch my children after school or before school. So, for example, what I went ahead and did was I hired my niece to watch my children. So that didn't work for long, so then I had to find another family member and another family member. So it was a struggle every day to figure out who was going to watch him. Food stamps, there was a great impact. I mean, we had to go off of a budget. You know, before it was probably like a $500 budget for food, but then I decreased it to $200. When I noticed that that was still not enough, I resorted to credit cards.
In a short time, Jeanette found herself with $12,000 in credit card debt, spent on basics like food, clothing, and shelter.
I feel that at sometimes I should just probably leave the job and go into another job that pays less or even go part-time, because it seems like I should make less money to have more benefits.
We can either go into the centers and help mentor them.
Janine Jeffries is an honors student working toward graduation in 2014 from Metropolitan State University. The mother of 5-year-old twins and 2 teenagers, Janine has depended on 19-year-old Taylor for day-to-day childcare. Soon, she hopes Taylor will follow her footsteps to study at Metro. Then, after her graduation, Janine will focus on the steps to a full-time job in a nonprofit, helping women in transition like herself. She has already started mentoring while in school and recently started a new internship with Project Wise. Janine finds that managing low-paid work, classes, and the bookkeeping of using work supports keeps her plenty busy.
For assistance, I'm currently on housing, Section 8, food assistance, and Medicaid. As of today, I literally just resolved an issue. Mind you, my food benefits drop on the 10th of the month because of paperwork issues that I had turned in, mind you, but they lost or got messed up in the shuffle. I've been without food assistance for 2 weeks, and me and my family have literally been like eating beans out of a can, just to kind of give you a picture of what we've been doing, and that's stressful. Where's my kiss? Given the struggles I've been through, I wanted a career where I can help those who are like me, women in transition, women at a disadvantage, women who had similar stories, women who feel that maybe they are not worthy or they have no hope, or that, they cannot possibly, have the things that they want and need. I want to make a difference in people's lives, to empower them and encourage them that, yes, you can, by using and disclosing my own story, where I came from, what I came from, and where I am today. You can do it.
Janine overcame an early brush with drugs and alcohol and grew determined to take care of herself and her children. She decided her best path was an education that will pay a living wage, and she's making her way there. She says hers is a good example of the type of family work supports can put on the road to self-sufficiency. But Janine knows to avoid the cliff effect next year, she needs to prepare for the time when help with housing, food, and health care are cut off.
You can't really make your way in this world without, an education. And I just cannot see myself surviving on $10, $12 an hour, especially with the family size that I have of 4. I have 4 kids and myself. I don't want to struggle, anymore. That's why I want to go to school, to better myself so that I can get off the assistance, because it's what it's supposed to be, assistance. It's not a livelihood. You shouldn't be passing it down generations to generations. You should be using it to assist yourself in, being self-sufficient.
We do live in this, idealistic society where everyone should have the opportunity to succeed and achieve this American dream, which who knows what that is anymore.
Lorena Garcia works as a women's advocate at Denver-based Calor. She is blunt in her assessment of the status quo.
I would say that the cliff effect is the #1 reason that is keeping families and women from actually achieving economic self-sufficiency. When women and families are able to qualify for welfare services, for child care assistance, for example, they are then binded by the extreme restrictions and eligibility standards in maintaining that assistance. And if they take even a single cent of a raise, they could lose that child care assistance that they need, and then potentially that puts them into a spiral down and unable to then go to work. And essentially it's much more detrimental for the family than it is helpful.
At the state and county levels of government, there is talk of addressing the cliff effect, but the possible solution framed in the county pilot project still has no counties volunteering to try it. If they would, experts believe it could make a big difference.
We're in discussion with the counties currently. No one has come forward to make a commitment, and we want to get the word out to each and every county across the state of Colorado to make sure that the people who can make impact, who are in the know and can make something happen, are aware that these 10 counties would be very meaningful for the cliff effect.
The reason this matters, the reason the cliff effect matters, and matters for all of us in society, is that, again, we want to provide the opportunity for these families to get into the workforce, to stay working, to reach self-sufficiency, to get ahead. And that's the whole design, the whole reason we've created the system the way that we have. And by not providing incentives for people to keep working and to earn more, in fact, by creating incentives for people to not to get ahead, creates a barrier and affects all of us.
It seems like life would be easier to not make as much money as I do now, because then I would have support and stepping stones to get ahead in life. If I was able to have all these programs and attend school, then I would go back to school, get a degree, and no longer be on these programs, and maybe even help out in any other way.
We talked about cutting the poverty rate in half by 2019, and I think we really need to focus a lot of energy on addressing poverty, making sure that especially families that are playing by the rules are able to have that security and are able to get ahead. Child care is one piece of it, but as you well know, when we talk about families that perhaps are marginalized, there's a number of things we could be doing, and I think it's a public-private kind of a thing to help with work supports, whether it's making sure that folks have access to affordable housing. Child care obviously is critical. Access to proper education, early childhood development. We're putting more dollars, for example, to the nurse-family partnership program, and those are evidence-based best practices that are that really make a difference. But in the end, in my opinion, if we make these investments up front, we're going to save an awful lot of money for the taxpayer in terms of public assistance programs, in terms of folks dealing with the criminal justice system, et cetera, et cetera. And the research bears that out, and I think we have a responsibility to solve the cliff effect problem and a variety of other things that face Colorado families and communities.
What we saw was the state of Vermont, which has a state-run system, not like Colorado, but done centrally throughout the state, and they set up the benefits based on a family's income, and as the family's income increased, they would pay a greater percentage of the child care costs. And so we looked at how they did that, because what they ended up with was, as you got to 100% of their limit, which may be 225% of poverty, the families were paying 100% of the child care costs. The walking down the hill as opposed to falling off the cliff.
Walking off the hill as opposed to falling off the cliff. No matter what view you take of government work supports, there is general agreement that they should be empowering more families to get to self-sufficiency, not holding back some of them when they get close. Those who are keeping an eye on the cliff effect and those using work supports hope the solution is in sight.
I'm using it as a stepping stone to get ahead in life, not to just sit at home and do nothing with my life.
For what it's worth, I'm grateful that it's there. Now, could it be better or improved? Most definitely.
I am an investment. I'm not just a person you're giving money to, I'm an investment, and that's how they should see it.
Presentation of Losing Ground, the Cliff Effect, is made possible by a grant from the Women's Foundation of Colorado. building resources and leading change so that every woman and girl in Colorado achieves her full potential. And by Janet Mordecai.